Okay, guys, decided to start our lesson today a little different than normal. I know this is not the norm, but you know what? We're locked in the house. We're all on the quarantine. Let's have a little fun before we start learning. What do you think? This is an old classic. Maybe you know it. Celebration by Kool and the Gang. Maybe you don't. It's probably so ancient for you. But it's definitely a fun song to start the day with. So celebrating good times, a new day, guys, another day with your family. Enjoy. And it's another day of learning. All right. As much as I want to dance for the next hour, unfortunately, I can't do that. But I would definitely encourage you to look up this song. It's Celebration by Kool and the Gang. It's an old classic, and it's just very upbeat and awesome. All right, guys. Yeah, just something a little different. Okay, guys. Hello, everyone. So this is your lesson for the week. It's on population dynamics. This is kind of interesting. It's kind of a shift. I know it's kind of a shift from what we've been learning lately. We did genetics, then we just did homeostasis, and now we're kind of completely switching gears, and we're going into population dynamics. I know what you're thinking. What in the world is that, Miss Oki? Well, I'm going to tell you. I also thought you might enjoy a nice little waterfall. What a great way. I really wish this one was moving. I'm going to try to find a nice moving waterfall, but waterfalls are always so relaxing. So in any case, guys, here we are. Let's get started. So we're going to be talking about population dynamics. What is that? Well, we're going to be identifying what that is. We're going to talk about what are the limiting factors on population dynamics. We're going to talk about 4 major things that affects the rate of population dynamics. Things like births, deaths, emigration, as well as immigration. We're also going to be talking about something called growth rates and what type of things influence the overall population growth rate within a given time. We're also going to discuss different types of growth observed in species populations. And then we're going to kind of end it off looking at, you guys are going to learn about the different differences between population size and the factors that can actually help reduce population size. So this is a really interesting topic. And they're probably thinking, well, why is it biology? Because when we think about population dynamics, it has to do with life. And population is a huge issue. Think about what we're going through right now. One of the major reasons why COVID-19 is spreading the way it is because of population dynamics. It has to do with people, right? This virus is spreading person to person. And it's spreading at the rate that it's going due to population dynamics. So as we go through this lesson, I'm going to kind of make that connection so you guys can understand why population dynamics is so important to biology and why biologists examine population dynamics when they're studying species. So this is really interesting. Okay, as always, feel free to take notes. You don't have to. I am not going to rate them, but feel free to take notes if you want to, because obviously everything I'm going to go over is going to be on your quiz, and you will be using it for an activity later. So to start us off, what in the world is population? Well, first of all, population is all the individuals of a species that live together in an area. Okay, so I can have population of people. I have a population of an animal, so a population of penguins. If any of you guys ever saw the March of the Penguins, you saw that there's quite a population of them in Antarctica. So a population of penguins, that's just a group of penguins living together. I think about Africa. You know, you have in your Sahara Desert, you have your lions, you have your giraffe, you have your zebras, you know, your gazelles, all the animals out there. They live in population groups. So a bunch of them are together. That's a population. It could be any species. It doesn't just have to be animals. It can be plants too. So think about in the rainforest, the redwood forest where you guys live, that is a population of redwood species. A plant. It's a collection of redwood plants all living together, hence the redwood forest. So it can be any type of species, animal or plant. It can be bugs, insects, any living type of species that's kind of grouped together in a specific area is considered a population. The demography or the demography, that is when you are actually studying the populations. And by studying them statistically, now statistics, think about that, it has to do with numbers, right? For those of you that love math, you all know that statistics has to do with calculating probabilities of stuff. You know, what are the chances of this and this happening? What are the chances of you having this or having that? Okay, statistics. So they do what they call a statistical study of populations. They do that so they can predict what's going to happen. What can change this population? What's going to cause this population to increase or decrease? And they do all that by running statistical analysis, by running math, right? By running mathematical problems. They can figure out, well, if this factor enters this population, how is it going to affect? Is it going to increase? Is it going to decrease? That, if you think about this, this is what they're doing now with COVID-19. When you listen on the news and they talk about, you know, when can we expect COVID-19 to level off, like the number of cases level off? They have statistical analysis. So they're looking at the stats. They're looking at the statistics of people, the rate at which people are getting COVID-19, the rate at which they're recovering from COVID-19, the rate at which they're dying from it. They're putting like all those numbers together, try to figure out, okay, when might we expect things to kind of calm down? Now, as of now, I haven't heard, you know, too much of a date. You know, you keep hearing different things because COVID-19 is a very new virus. So when you have something extremely new, it's kind of hard to do predictions. Whereas something like the flu, we've dealt with the flu for years. So statistically, we kind of know we have a flu season that comes in. They can statistically guess about how many people are going to get it, how many people are going to die, how many vaccines they need. You know, like that's how they figure all that out, is through statistical analysis of populations. And the way the flu affects populations, they can estimate, okay, we need these many vaccines of the influenza. So that's why you guys all know every year they talk about get your flu shot, get your flu shot. Because they have the statistical proof that when the virus comes through, we can expect these many people to get sick. We're going to need these many vaccines to try to prevent that. Okay? That's what they're running now on COVID-19. But like I said, COVID-19 is new. We are still learning. So there's still a lot to do to get there, to get that, to be able to predict properly. So right now, we really can't predict very well. That's why you hear a lot of conflicting pieces of information on the news. But they're getting there. They're working on it. They're working on it. All right. So in any case, what are some major dynamics? What are the three key features of population? Well, three basic things: size, density, and dispersion. Okay, those are the main like three aspects. So what's the size? It's just the number of people, the number of individuals, the number of animals, the number of insects, the number of plants in a given area. So if I were to block off a certain area, how many swans live there? How many people live there? How many palm trees are there? How many spiders are there? Whatever. So when I'm talking about the size, I want to know, well, how many individuals actually live in the area that I'm examining, that I'm trying to study. So that's a factor, because that makes a difference. What are some of the things that affect the rate of my population? Well, growth. Okay, let's think about growth. What makes a population grow? Babies, right? The birth rate, what they call natality. Natality is the birth rate. How many babies are being born? So we all know babies are born every day, okay? But we also know that every day people die. Mortality, or the death rate. So when they're talking about growth rate in a population, because remember, we're looking at the size of the population, okay? So I want to know how many people are in this area, okay? So I'm going to count the people, but the number of people are not going to stay the same, obviously, because there's always growth. Babies are always born, people are always dying. So when we are looking at the size of a population, we do take into consideration the growth rate. So we're going to look at, okay, well, how many people are coming into this world? How many people are leaving? That's what we want to look at. And it's a simple subtraction. This isn't exactly, rocket science here, right? Okay, this isn't a difficult thing to do. The number of people born minus the number of people that are dying will give you how much the population is growing. Okay, and so we can use that number to determine, okay, well, if we have these many people that being born, these many people dying, I subtract the two, Now I have an idea of what my growth rate is going to be. And now I can predict, okay, well, in 5 years and 10 years, we're going to have these many people. The size of the population in this given area is going to be this number because I've calculated my growth rate. Okay. Again, we're looking at birth versus death. That's going to equal something called rate of natural increase. They use a letter R for that. For those of you in math, you know that we love, symbols. We love variables, right? Use variables a lot in algebra, X and Y, sometimes a Z, okay? We do the same thing in the scientific world. We use a lot of variables to represent different things in equations that we use in math, in the mathematical aspect of science. And so that's what's the one thing we do here. So we use a B for birth, D for death, R for the rate of natural increase. Natural increase meaning people are dying not because there was like a major war, something unusual happening. We're just saying a natural increase because of just, average number of deaths, average number of births. Nothing unusual is affecting us is usually what we're looking at. Although, like right now, our death rate is very high because COVID-19 is affecting it. So we're going to have a rate. Whether or not it's an increase or a decrease is going to be yet to see. That's where something like the census of this year is going to come in. We'll talk about the census later, but looking at what happens this year, considering how many people are dying, it'll be interesting to see what our growth rate is for this year when they calculate it. Obviously, they can't calculate it now because we're in the middle of it. But once this year is up and they do the calculation, it'll be interesting to see if we actually increase or decrease in population. Interesting to see. Okay, in any case, moving on. So this is how we visualize it. Now we all know in math, we love to visualize, right? That's why we have graphs. We have bar graphs, line graphs, circle graphs, all kind of graphs, right? Same thing in biology, okay? Because looking at numbers can be kind of difficult to grasp, okay? So we're talking about by size of the population, okay? How am I going to visualize the size of my population? This is one way of doing it. Isn't this awesome? I love this graph, okay? This is like what they call percentage. It's an age graph. It shows the percentage of the population, male and female, and by age. And this tells us a lot of information. So let's look at it for a second. Okay, so here's Kenya, USA, and this is Italy. Now, as you can see, this is rather old. I mean, it only goes up to 1994. So this is by no means a more recent type of graph. We'll look at more recent ones later in the lesson. But just so you can get an idea. So look at this, guys. What is this telling you? All right, so these are the year of birth. So what the last person born here was in 1994. That's the last birth that we're looking at here. So that's why they're babies. Okay, that's what I'm telling you, that this was taken around 1994. Sometime after 1994, they did this. Okay, but what does this tell you? In around 1994, look at Kenya. How many older people were alive in around the 1994s? Well, look at my graphs. Look at my numbers. These are my ages. Look at the older people, and look how many existed. Now you see right here, percentage of population. This is 2%. So if I were to follow this all the way up, you see that? Follow my finger. Do you see how when I get up here past about 50 or so, the percentage of people are below 2%? So in other words, if I grabbed 100 people in Kenya, less than 2 of them, maybe 1, would be 80 years old. Out of the 100 people that I grab, only 1 might be 80. 1 might be in their 70s. Or maybe I'll say 2 because this is 70 to 79. Maybe 2. Maybe 2. Maybe 2 in their 60s. Maybe, because look, this is 2, right? Remember, this is 2. I'm doing my line up. So I'm still below 2. I'm still below 2. So maybe 1 or 2, 1 or 2, 1 or 2. I don't hit 2% until I get to about, what, maybe the 40s, give or take. So in a population of 100 people, maybe 2 of them would be female and 40 years old. Maybe, if I go on the male side, maybe 2 of them would be males in the 40s. But look at how few are in the older range. So what does that tell you about Kenya? Do people live long in Kenya? No. Not according to this graph in this time period, no. Are there a lot of births? Are there a lot of babies being born? Yeah, look how many. 8% female, 8% male. So 16%, if I do 8 plus 8, so 8% boys, 8% girls, right? 8 plus 8 is 16. So 16% of the population is between the ages of 0 and 4. So 100 people, 16 babies are there. Look at 5 to 9, 8 and 8, that's another 16. So now 16 and 16 is what, 32. So in a group of 100 people, there are 32 individuals that are below the age of 9. Do you see how it works? Lots of babies, few older people. Why? What do you think is happening in Kenya that will cause many people to die so young? Could it be the poverty? Could it be the poor health conditions, the poor living conditions? Maybe they don't have food. I mean, there's various factors, but do you see how you can get that information by looking at this? This is telling me that they're having a lot of babies, but they're not surviving. They're not surviving. I mean, look, I hit my 20s, I'm down about 5% already. So in other words, they're not even all making it to their 20s, let alone older ages. That's what it's telling me. Let's look at something like the U.S. Do we have a lot of babies in the U.S.? Look how few, less than 4% in comparison to Kenya. So we're having fewer babies. But are we surviving? Look how many older people we have. Yeah. Now we do have more people in the mid-range. You see how this part here kind of bubbles out? You see how we have about 4% female, about 4% male in the 30s, 40 range, okay? So we seem to have more people in that 30 to 40 range age than we do even people having children. So that's telling me that a lot of these older individuals, not all of them are having babies. And if they do have a child, it's not big families. Here, they're obviously having big families because look how many people are in the birthing age. You figure people have children, a woman is able to have a child on average, we'll say 15 into their 40s, okay? And you see how in Kenya, you have fewer childbearing women than you do children. In other words, these women are having lots of kids. Look over here. When I look at the childbearing years, my children almost match. So that tells me that, yeah, they might be having kids, but they may be only having 1 or 2 on average. I'm not saying every family in America has 1 or 2 kids, but a lot of families in America have 1 or 2 kids. They aren't having tons and tons of large families like you do in Kenya. Now look at Italy on the other hand. Look how many kids they have here versus the adults. So look, in the childbearing years, there's way more adults than babies. So what does that tell you? Are all of these people having babies? Probably not. So you probably have a lot of families here where it's just husband and wife or maybe singles. They're not really having lots of children, okay? But they are surviving. I mean, look how many people survive, you know? So they are living long, they're just not having a lot of children. So what does this mean? Okay, well, this is an image of what they call rapid growth. So if theoretically, if all of these children survived and got older, think about how fast the population in Kenya will grow. If all 8% of these girls and the 8% boys, if all of them survived into their 20s and then they had kids, could you imagine how big the growth would be in Kenya? So they call this pyramid, this is what they call a population pyramid. This population pyramid is called a rapid growth one. The US, on the other hand, is about even. So you see that? So the children, the parents, the childbearing year individuals are having few children. They're having children, but it's few. So it's almost even. So we call that slow growth. So there'll be some, but not very much because we're not having a lot of kids. Now, Italy, on the other hand, is reverse. Because think about it, they're having fewer children. So when these children come up here to childbearing years and they have kids, it's going to be the reverse. It's going to be what they call zero or decreased growth. Because these children aren't that many. So it's, you know, it's kind of coming in. So they call zero growth. So that's one of the things what these population pyramids show us. They help us to see, they help us to predict what could possibly happen in the future. Now, the possibility and the reality doesn't always match, but it's just telling you a possibility. So possible rapid growth, possible slow growth, possible zero growth. That's what that's showing me. All right, so looking at those key factors. So next thing on the list, we talked about size, talk about density. Density is the measurement of population per unit area or growth. That's the number of people per space. That's what density is. So in chemistry, when you guys say chemistry next year, we talk about density. Density is if I have like, you know, a block, and within the block, I have, let's say, 10 marbles. I have another block, same size, I only have like 3 marbles. That's a difference in density, because if I only have 3 marbles in here, that's less dense than, let's say, I have 10 marbles. Or if I have 20 marbles. If I have 20 marbles in the center of my hand, that's very dense. That's a lot in a small space. So when we talk about density, that's what we're talking about. How many people actually live in a given area? So let's think about this. Let's think about New York City, okay? If you've ever been to New York City, I'm sure you've all seen it online. So if you think about New York City, think about Manhattan. Like over 1 million people live in just the island of Manhattan, okay? That's a small area with a lot of people. Hence, they call New York City the city that never sleeps, even though right now it's very empty. But the point is, there's a ton of people living in New York City. It's very, very dense. Think about the Midwest. I think about something like Arizona. You know, well, where you live. You guys can live in the deserty kind of area. Think about how many people live in that area, in the desert area. I think about Arizona, the Grand Canyon, that kind of area. People live out there, but they're scattered. There might be an indigenous tribe here, especially, you know, think about the Grand Canyon area. There's an indigenous tribe here, indigenous tribe there, kind of thing, scattered about that Arizona kind of area. So a lot of that desert kind of area, people are scattered out. Think about farmland, where there's a lot of farms, okay? One farm might have, what, 30 acres? So you have people that live here, 30 acres. Someone lives here, 30 acres. Okay, that's less dense. So we talk about density is how people live within a given space. And that makes a difference. That makes a difference. Again, thinking back to COVID-19. If my neighbor is a mile away, what are the chances of me getting COVID-19 from them? If I live in New York City and my neighbor is about 5 feet away from me because we're so densely packed, what are the chances of me getting COVID-19? Well, think about the numbers of cases that are going on right now in New York. New York is the hotspot. New York has the highest number of cases in the entire US. Why? Population density. Everybody's here. You know, how are you going to have, we talk about social distancing. In New York City, it's kind of hard to do that when, especially, again, if you've ever been in the city, you walk in Times Square, you can't take 2 steps before you meet somebody else because it's just so densely packed. Hence, COVID-19 is running rampant there. But what about some other states where people are further out? They have cases. I'm not saying that they don't have cases, but not as much as New York. Population density is a big factor in that. Okay, so what are some other things to think about? What are some things that affect density? Immigration. Now, we all know about immigration. That is nothing new, right? People moving into an area. But we never think about immigration, people moving out. That's a factor. And immigration, guys, isn't just changing countries. We always think about, people moving into the US from Europe, from Canada, from South America, from Central America. We always think about people coming into the United States. We never think about immigration. There's a lot of people that leave the US. There are a lot of Americans that move out of the US and move to places like Ecuador. I know because I've been to Ecuador and I've seen them there. Okay? So you have a lot of Americans that will emigrate to other countries like Costa Rica. I think of Ecuador. That's because those are the places I've been. So they emigrate out. They emigrate to Europe, to wherever they want to go. But it doesn't just have to be leaving the country. It could be leaving the area. So for instance, I immigrated from New York. I was actually born in New Jersey. I lived the majority of my teen years, college years in New York. And then when I finished college, I emigrated here to Florida. So I left New York and came to Florida. So I emigrated from New York, but I immigrated into Florida. Does that make sense? I emigrated. I moved out of the population of New York and I moved into the population of Florida. So you can do the same thing. Maybe not all of you guys are native Californians. Maybe you're from a different state. Maybe you're from a different state. So let's say you lived in Arizona, you emigrated out of Arizona and you immigrated into California. It could just be neighborhoods. Maybe you changed cities. Right now you guys are in Lancaster, I believe. So maybe you lived in Los Angeles. Maybe you emigrated out of Los Angeles and immigrated into Lancaster. So these terms aren't just leaving the country. It's just leaving a population of where you live. It could be just leaving your neighborhood. You can still be in Lancaster, but maybe you changed neighborhoods. So you left the population at this neighborhood in Lancaster, and now you've moved to this neighborhood in Lancaster. So anytime you leave one population, go to another, you're doing an emigration and immigration. Now, there are some factors that also affect our density. What's called density-dependent factors. These are biotic factors or living. Remember, biotic means living. Bio means life. So biotic factors in the environment that can have an effect on our population size. Things like disease, competition, and parasites. Disease, COVID-19, we just talked about that. That is why, again, New York City skyrocket cases of COVID-19 in New York City, but lower rates in some other states because of the density. COVID-19 is a perfect example of a density-dependent factor. Competition, think about food. Food is something that's competitive. If you live with multiple siblings in your house, you deal with competition every day at dinner, right? If there's 5 rolls, who gets the roll first? Okay, a little bit of competition there. So food factors are things that also are density dependent because, depending on the number of people in a given area will determine food distribution. Okay, density independent factor, things that we can't help. Abiotic factors, so they're not living things. Okay, they're not living things. Abiotic factors will be things that are regardless of the density, so temperature and weather. It doesn't matter if there are 1 million people or 2 people. If it's going to be hot, it's going to be hot because the sun does not change its temperature because there's only 2 people standing in an area. You get what I'm saying? The number of people does not determine the speed of the wind. The number of people does not determine whether or not it rains or not. That has nothing to do with it. That's completely independent. We have no control over those things. So density-dependent factors are things that increasing population, decreasing population will affect it. So people directly affect the rate of these things. These things people cannot control. Like I said, we can't control the weather. It doesn't matter if one person is standing in the area or 50 million. If it's going to rain, it's going to rain. If it's going to snow, it's going to snow. We don't control that. Okay? That's what that is there. All right. So factors that affect population growth. So immigration will add to a population, more people moving into an area. Emigration will take away because people are leaving the area. Natality, people being born, add to a population. Mortality, people die, take away from that, take away from population. So these are the 4 things that are constantly working at the number of people living in a given area, constantly. So hence the population in a given area is constantly going up and down, depending on all of these factors. And these are the factors that those statistical analysis individuals look at when they're trying to figure out how many roads to build, how many hospitals do we need, how many doctors do we need, how many houses do we need? Do we need new housing development? Are we getting a high immigration of people into our area? Like where I live here in Florida, we are having a high immigration into the city that I live in. So they are building many, many condos and houses. Is crazy. Like every bit of land that's available, they're sticking a house on because so many people are moving into my particular area. Now there are some areas that a lot of people are leaving for different reasons. And so those are the areas where sometimes they become like ghost towns, you know, where you have all these buildings, but there's no one there because everybody left. So that kind of thing happens too. So, but anyway, like I was saying, these are the 4 things that all affect the way population grows. Now, dispersion is the next thing. If you remember the list that we went over here, we talked about size, number of people in a given area, like how many people are there. Density, how dense is it? Okay, how compact is that size of population? The number of people in that area. Let's talk about dispersion. How are they like located? So dispersion can be a number of different ways. You can have them clumped. Notice, you see the image here? You see how there's a clump here? Space, clump, space, clump, space, clump, space, clump. So some things live that way, like these fish live that way. People live this way too. I'll show you an image later of how people can live this way. It can be uniform, evenly spread out. Like penguins tend to live because they're territorial, in the sense that, I say territorial. They're in the sense that when they make their nest, they want to have a certain area around them. Like flamingos do that too. When they make their nest, like this is my area. You know, they're communal animals, so they live in a group. But once they're nesting, they're like, don't come over here. This is my area. So it's kind of uniform because they're all spread out, giving each other significant space so that they can nest properly. And then, of course, you have random, which is exactly what the word says. It's just random. It's just a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit everywhere. Okay? So your population can have that kind of look to it. So those are your 3 things: clumped, uniform, and random. That has to do with the amount of space between the individuals in the area. So how do we measure it? Okay, so we look at the number of individuals in a given area or the volume of it. We count them in the population. We can estimate by sample, or we simply call mark recapture and mark recapture method. These are the different ways in which they can count populations. Now, this is one way that we count population density in US. Census. Now, we all know you guys should have all probably received your little card already because we're doing the census this year. We do it every 10 years. This is 2020, hence census year. The next time will be 2030, so it's every 10 years. But this is how we estimate population density. We do a census. And it's really, really, really important because this is how we get an understanding of how many people are living within a given area. Let's give us an example of where people are shifting. When we compare, let's say 2010 to 2020, when we do a comparison, we can say, wow, this city had a lot more people than it does now. So people are emigrating out of this city. Whereas another city maybe have fewer numbers in 2010, but now 2020, it's gone up. So people are emigrating into the city. So we can use the census for a lot of different things. It also helps us to see where our monies need to go as far as tax dollars. You know, which cities are going to need more money because they're growing or they're decreasing. Where do we need to put more schools, more roads, more hospitals, things like that. Where do we need to put more universities? You know, so the census gives us a lot of information. I know there's a lot of people talking about that census now, but it's very, very important for all of us to fill that out. So the question is, have you guys filled out your census yet? If you haven't, please do. Encourage your parents to do it because we need it. It's very, very important information. All right, estimating by sampling. So one way that we can get information concerning a population is by sampling. So here's a whole bunch of people. Please, I am not going to test all them people. That's just too many people. So you get a sample. So you pick people. Okay. A sample, you know, they're chosen out of the population, and because they're chosen kind of here and there, here and there, here and there, we can say that this population, this sample, is a good representation of this population. That's how they run tests. Have you ever wondered, like, when they have a drug coming out, or when they are, you know, whenever they're releasing something new into the population, how do they test it? How do they know how it's going to affect people in a given area? They do sampling. This is one of the ways that they test it out. Because they can't test every single American, but they test some Americans. So they get a random sampling, and they say, okay, if this product, whatever it is, affects the sample in an adverse way, in a bad way, then we know it's going to be the same thing to everybody else. If it affects them in a good way, then it'll be good for everybody else. So a good example of that is the one of the drugs they were testing for COVID-19. Maybe you've heard about it. They did a sampling. They tested it out on some people that were sick, and unfortunately, that medication did not work. It didn't work. It actually killed some of the people. So they know that if that medication killed and adversely affect this sample of people, then we're not going to release it to the public because it's going to kill them too. So as they are actively testing medications and different things to try to help with COVID-19, they're always going to test it on a sample first. So they test it here and see if it works out good for them, then there's a good chance it'll work out good for everybody else. If it doesn't, then we're not going to release it. So they do it through sampling. Now, this is another one they do. Now, this obviously works more, excuse me, for animals than people, obviously. But if I am trying to study, let's say, turtles don't want to sit still. Now, unless I stick them in maybe in a laboratory, that's different. But if I want to study turtles in the real life, and I'm going to find out, well, how many turtles live in this particular area? Well, again, turtles don't sit still, okay? And they're not going to come on command. So that's not going to work. So what they do is they'll get some turtles and they'll mark them. So let's say this is the first day, so they found 10 turtles, and they marked all 10 turtles, okay? So now the next day they go back out and they capture 10 turtles, and they figure out, okay, well, how many of the turtles that we caught on the second day, how many of them have the mark? So they look at that, okay? So in this particular case, they marked 10 the first day. And the second day, look, about half of them that they caught had the mark. So they can estimate that, oh, there's probably about 20 individuals because they got half the population back. You see that? They marked 10, about half of them they were able to catch the next day. So that's telling them that maybe there's 2 times the amount of the original sample. So they can estimate that there might be about 20 turtles. Now, is this an exact? It could be off a little bit, but it does give them an estimate. That's why it's an estimation. They can estimate that there's probably about 20 turtles in this given area due to this type of sample they call mark and recapture. But again, this is really with the animals, not with people. Okay. All right, so some models for population growth. So now that I can study population growth, I can do census, I can do, if I'm doing animals, mark and recapture, I can do sampling. I can do sampling for testing. I can also do sampling for counting, okay? That was another thing I didn't mention before that this can be used for, is sampling for counting. We can sample and count how many people are within this sample, and then that can infer how many people are in a greater population. So not only can it be used for testing of medication and things like that, but they also use this for counting a population. We can use the census, obviously that's a good way, but we can also do it through sampling. And we can estimate population size through sampling of a smaller group of individuals. So that's another way that we can do counting. Okay, so in any case, going back to this. So now that I have those numbers, I can plot them and make some beautiful graphs. I can have what they call exponential growth or logistic growth. So exponential, think about math class. You know what an exponent is, right? Exponent is that little number up here. Okay. Exponential growth means that the growth starts off relatively slow in the beginning. So look at your numbers. See how the numbers are? 1, 2, 4, 8. See how the numbers are kind of like low? But then it shoots up. Look here. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Boom, 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 boom. Look at that. Look how high, how fast it jumps. Now, this is great, especially when we are sampling like bacterial cells. Bacteria replicates in this way. They replicate this way in your body, which is part of the reason why you feel sick within a couple of days, because bacteria tend to grow exponentially. So you get a virus, or I say get bacterial. You get a bacteria today, it'll grow exponentially, and within a day or two, you start feeling sick. That sickness is because of bacterial overload, because of this happening with the bacteria in your body. Well, we can also do it in the culture. Biologists do that all the time. We grow bacteria in like a little flask. This is an Erlenmeyer flask. We grow them in an Erlenmeyer flask and we can count them, and that shows exponential growth. Well, we also can see that with populations too, and I'll show you that in a second. We're going to have something called logistic growth. Now, this is more reality. Okay, so technically speaking, just like bacteria, things should just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. But the problem is this. What allows a population to grow? What do living things need? We need food, we need shelter, right? So things can't grow exponentially forever. So logistic growth curve is more reality. So like here are some, I think these are walruses here. Are those seals? I think those might be seals. Okay, so yeah, I think these are seals. I don't see the tusk. Yeah, they're seals. Okay, so anyway, so here's a picture of some seals. They're all happy-go-lucky here. So in the beginning, there were only a few seals, and population grew, but eventually it leveled off. Why? Well, look at it. Look at the density of the population. What's the problem? Well, is there enough room for everybody to live in? Because they need a little bit of space. Is there enough food to carry all those people? No. So eventually what happens is some of them have to die off. They die off because now they're competing for food. There's too many of them, not enough food to feed everybody. So some are going to die because they don't have any food. There's going to be some level of competition because everybody's going to want a piece of this rock. Somebody's going to lose, and the loser is going to die probably. So it's going to level off. So this is the reality of what happens with organisms in a population. It doesn't grow exponentially forever and ever. Even in this bacteria, the numbers will go high, but eventually but so many bacteria can fit in this little flask. Eventually, they're going to run out of food and the bacteria will start dying off. So even though theoretically, we should be able to grow and continue to grow and never stop, it doesn't happen that way in reality. In reality, we always level off because we run out of food, we run out of space, and competition takes over. That's what we call the carrying capacity, or the letter K for carrying, which is funny. I know what you're thinking. Well, Miss Hogan, carrying such the letter C rather than using a K. Guys, I did not choose the letter they did, but they chose a K. But carrying capacity, the letter C is probably for something else. But in any case, it's the maximum population size that can be supported by available resources. There can only be but so many organisms in a given area because an environment can only hold but so many individuals, period. I mean, that's just it. There isn't food forever. You know, someone's going to have to die because they can't support everybody. That's what they call carrying capacity. And when a specific area reaches that carrying capacity, we level off because now what's happening is you have new birth natality and you have mortality at the same time. So deaths and births keep the level like this, because you have animals that are dying, animals are being born, because the environment just cannot hold any more of that specific species, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, so what are the things that will cause declining birth or increased death rates? Are limiting food supply, buildup of toxic waste, increased disease, and predation. So what does that mean? So we talked about this, buildup of toxic waste. This tends to happen if, like with pollutants. A good example of buildup of toxic waste is the DDT, which is something from years ago back. I think it was like 1910 or something like that. In any case, we used to use DDT as a pesticide to spray farmland. Well, later on, they found out that when the birds absorbed this toxin, it got into the shell of their eggs. So when the birds would sit on the shell would crack, killing the offspring. Okay, so that buildup of toxic waste within the organism of the bird was passed on into the shell of the baby, of their newborn, killing their newborns. Hence, that caused a decrease in their population, because they couldn't have, none of their babies were being born because they're being crushed every time they sat on the egg. Another example of that is certain toxins. I think about things like mercury, stuff like that, that will build up in an organism over time and is passed on to the offspring. And as that toxin is passed on to the next offspring, it increases and can eventually end up killing that offspring. So there's different types of waste products that are out there that can build up within an organism through generations and can actually cause an increase in the death rate, a decrease in the birth rate, because that toxin is building up in that organism. Increase of disease, again, thinking about COVID-19, but there are other diseases out there that affect plants, animals. Predation is a big one. Let's take a look at this. This is a great example, what they call boom and bust. All right, so here we go. Snow hare versus the lynx. Okay, so here's the lynx. Beautiful, right? Here's the snow hare. Run, baby, run. All right, so let's see what happens. So obviously the lynx will eat the hare, right? But look what happens here. Okay, so the black line is my snow hares, my little bunnies. And then the lynx are this beautiful cat here, okay? So notice what happens. Here, the lynx, the predator, amount has gone down. When there's fewer predators, think about what that means. If there are fewer people trying to eat you, what's going to happen to your population? Well, obviously, a lot more of the hares are going to survive. So what happens to the population of hares? They go up. But when you have more hares, that means there's more food for the lynx. So as the food or the prey increases, now my lynx has more food. So now they're eating, they're like in lynx heaven, you know, they're just chomping down on these hares. So their numbers go up. But what happens is, as their numbers go up and they're eating up all the hares, they're eating up all the bunnies, the population of the bunnies start to go down. When the number of prey goes down, now you have all of these lynx and you have few prey. So now, instead of like 10, let's say before maybe I had two lynx, but I had 80 hares. So that's a lot of food for two lynx, right? But now there's a bunch of lynx, but not enough hares. So maybe there's 5 of us competing for that one rabbit. Only one of us is going to get that rabbit. Somebody's going to starve. Somebody's going to starve because there isn't enough food. There's enough prey. So as my prey count goes down, my predator count goes down because it has to die off. There isn't enough food for everybody. So now look at what my predator count is. But now there's fewer predators. Well, I'm going to say, let's say there's only 10 lynx. So now guess what happens? The bunnies aren't getting eaten as much because there isn't enough predators. So that was my bunny count. But then guess what happens? Now there's a lot of food. And now the prey can eat the food. As the prey is eating, they're making babies, they're eating, they're just chomping down, they're having a little banquet. But again, as they're eating more and more and more of the little bunnies, population goes down. So you can see that relationship between predator and prey. They call that booms and busts because it's a boom and a bust, a boom and a bust, a boom and a bust. You see how it's like this? That is the relationship between predator and prey. It's always boom, bust, boom, bust, boom. But it does one of these numbers all the time, all the time. So lots of food, lots of predators. Less food, less predators. It goes back and forth and back. And this is just the reality of predator versus prey. That is the relationship between population and its food. It's always going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, there are some strategies that organisms use to survive because let's think about this. These poor bunnies are always going to get eaten. So what is their strategy for survival? How do they keep living? Because technically speaking, all the bunnies should be gone, but they're not because they have a strategy. We're going to call our strategy what they call reproductive strategies. Okay. And our strategists are organisms that have a very short lifespan. They tend to have a small body. They reproduce very quickly. They have tons of young, very little parental care. They don't really care about that. And things like roaches, disgusting, weed, bacteria, things like that, flies. If you think about any organism, I'm going to stand in front of them, I can't stand looking at them. If you think about any organism that has a ton of babies, they don't live very long, and they're the food source for something else, chances are there are strategists because that's how they survive. Think about it. Think about it. If you know you're going to get eaten, you know, how are you going to survive? If you only have 2 babies, you are not going to exist because you're going to get eaten. So what you do is you have 100 babies, maybe 50 of them will get eaten, maybe 50 will survive. And now my species can continue to live on. So a lot of insects fall in that category. If you think about it, because insects are a great food source for many, many, many animals. And not just one animal, I'm talking about multiple animals will eat insects. So the only way insects are able to survive is because they have a gazillion babies. The majority of them die, but just a few survive. And those few that survive is what keeps the population going. Now, on the flip side, you have what they call K strategists. K strategists have a long life, huge bodies. They reproduce very slowly, very few young, and they really love their babies. They take care of their babies. Let's think about why. Here's an elephant. An elephant's pregnancy or gestation rate is over a year. It's a long time to have a baby. And how many do they have? 1. Usually 1, maybe 2, usually 1. And they care for that baby. Think about how long it takes. It takes a while for that baby to grow. It takes a while. Well, why? Who is the predator to an elephant in nature besides human beings? Nobody. It's a top predator. No one really attacks the elephant. Not really. I mean, people do, but in the wild, not really. I mean, it's, it could happen. I'm not gonna say it can't happen, but it doesn't usually happen because they're top predators. Think about a giraffe. Who eats a giraffe? Again, it could happen. Yes, it can happen, but not usually. And usually when they're getting hunted, it's usually the young that gets killed, usually. But again, it's not something that happens all the time because they're top predators. So hence, they don't have to worry about having hundreds and hundreds of babies for survival because they're going to survive. The chances of surviving are very, very high. So they can have few young, longer gestation, take care of their babies. Over here, they know they're going to die. Lots of babies. I don't care for them because you're going to die. You're going to die. So I'm just trying to keep my species alive. That's the whole point of these guys, R strategists. They want to stay alive. Stay alive, stay alive, stay alive, stay alive. K strategists, we're going to live anyway, so we're going to have a full and like productive type of life. Okay? So what I'm going to do, because this video is like super long, I know. So I know this video is very, very long, so we are going to take a break right now. I'm going to have a second video for the next section, which is human population and distribution. We'll focus a little bit more on that. But we're going to stop with our R and K strategists. So we're going to end this video right here. And to end it all, let's end it off with a little bit of our song that we started off with. Okay, we made it through this video. I know it's long, guys, but this is it. Okay, I will see you in the next video, guys. Bye-bye.